Most people have the conception that a no-code application can't do much. They always ask, can I build this in no? I tell people, yes, 8 to 9 times out of 10.
Join Panida, Wayrojpitak on the Techful Founder podcast. Empower your startup journey as a non-technical founder with actionable insights from successful entrepreneurs. Right, so this guy right here has helped startups and businesses save over $1 million in development costs and more than 4,000 hours by building smarter with AI and no code. If you've been wondering what the shift is here actually looks like, this episode has got answers. Xan, welcome to the show. Can you share a specific success story where you use AI and no-code tools to help a business scale? What were the challenges and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think probably the best one is one of my own businesses. I have a drop shipping business. It's called justpaintbynumber.com. And so we recently transitioned from drop shipping model to actually producing the kits in the US for a number of reasons. And so one of the biggest challenges that we had was inventory management. And so what happened is our business, the conversion software that converts a photo into a paint by number kit, basically spits out a card that has the code of the paint that's needed for it, and then the number of pods that's being used. And we have 1,400 different colors. So it's just a massive inventory challenge. So what I did using Bubble, which is a no-code tool that I use quite a bit, is I used a AI tool called Mindy that basically I trained that AI tool to scan that card and then basically ran a workflow to identify, okay, what's the code of the color being used on that card and then how many pods? And then basically it would subtract those pods from inventory. Like I said, we were able to manage 1,400 different colors. It was just a massive inventory problem. So with AI and no code, we were actually able to solve that problem pretty successfully. So that's the biggest one that comes to mind.
That's awesome. So how long did it take for you to build that?
It's actually a number of things that no code tool does, that no code application does. So it actually does proof approval and things like that. But that portion probably took like 2 to 3 weeks. And honestly, most of that was trying to figure out the API integration. And then also I had a technical issue with the optical character recognition portion of that and just training it. And actually it ended up being an error on the API side. So it actually wouldn't take quite as long, but that again, probably took 2 to 3 weeks. And again, most of that was just trying to figure out the API integration.
Definitely. So what are some common misconceptions about using AI and no code development that you encounter with entrepreneurs?
So I'm going to skew this answer more towards the no code aspect. I mean, that is usually what we do is we build no code applications and then we incorporate AI into them. So I would say the biggest thing that I've been running into recently, and a lot of this is just education on my part, is just most people have the conception that a no-code application is like Zapier, right? Where it's very limited functionality, you can't do much. And so they always ask, can I build this in no-code? So I tell people the answer is yes, probably 8 to 9 times out of 10. And so I think people are surprised by that. And so I think that's where there's just been a misconception, and I'm sure coders don't help that along, that you just can't build it in no code. And the reality is 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes. Now, the answer is, should you build in no code? That's a more complicated question. Or if I do build in no code, how long will this last? And so those are probably more relevant discussions, but can you build a no code? Like I said, most people don't think it can, but the reality is that they're wrong more often than they're right. That makes sense.
So in what occasions would they be right? Would it need to be what kind of applications are unable to build no code?
So we actually recently encountered a client where they basically, Vappy is a very popular voice AI API where you can build a phone agent with it, right? And they came to us and said, hey, we want to build a Vappy clone just because of cost. The cost of Vappy was getting so high that they wanted to build a low cost version of Vappy. So my team and I discussed it, and the reality is, could we build it in no code? And the answer was yes. Our recommendation was honestly not to build in no code. Let me explain why. So I always explain no code is still coding, but I explain it a lot of times it's really like coding with the translator in between. right? If you had a conversation with someone and you need a translator, like no code is that translator, right? And so there's a little bit of a delay between what I said, the translator translates it and gives it to the person I'm speaking to, right? And so in most applications, that little bit of lag is inconsequential because of the application. Like there's not really an issue. But when you're talking about a phone agent, what every millisecond is the difference between someone getting frustrated and being able to feel like they're talking to a real person, that then becomes an issue. And that's where we're like, yes, we can build this, but we don't think you should build this in Node. Does that make sense? So that's one that comes to mind. And there's other ones that, like, one of the biggest issues used to be, and it still is, scale, right? If you're trying to scale it up, at some point there might, not always, but might be an issue where no code just can't handle the load. For a lot of applications we build, that's a non-issue. But I tell people, like, if you're encountering that issue, that's a really good problem to have, right? Like, if you're forced to build something, like graduate from no code, then you've done something. But for most people, the no code application will be fine. And a lot of applications we build are kind of internal tools for a lot of businesses. And so scale is not really an issue for them.
So are you building more of internal tools or startups completely?
It's been a mixture of both. What we're encountering a lot more recently is we are starting to try and niche down a little bit. Is we're working with a few healthcare startups where it's kind of the full application. Those are customer facing tools. We've built other ones that are more internal. One of our biggest ones that we built was in the reinsurance industry. I guess a little bit of internal tool, a little bit of B2B, like enterprise tools. But so it's really a mix, honestly.
See. So how do you approach integrating AI into no-code solutions, and what benefits does this bring to businesses?
Yeah, so we're certainly looking to do more of this. And I'm actually, there's some new tools that I'm trying to experiment with to do this. But in general, the beauty is AI works really well with no code, right? Because usually it's some sort of API integration. No code makes it, in general, really easy to integrate with APIs. Now, one thing that you're seeing that more and more no code tools are doing is there used to be your traditional APIs, there's streaming APIs, and I forget what the other version of that is, but it used to be, okay, with kind of your traditional APIs, you used to send all the information in one payload, and then they would get a response back. The issue is that doesn't really work well with AI APIs, right? Because you're getting real-time information. And so if you have to wait for a big chunk of information, that really slows the process down. So what you're seeing more and more now, so Xano's a big no-code tool that we work with. Bubble is offering this option as well, is what are called streaming APIs, where you're sending the information in real time and getting it back in real time. And so you eliminate that lag period of, okay, it's like having a conversation and you have to say an entire paragraph before you get the answer back. And so that you can see how that conversation would get very clunky versus having a real-time conversation where people are going back and forth in real time. And so these streaming APIs that no-code tools are offering now are 100% designed for AI API. Kind of the trend that I'm seeing that I want to do more of are these multi-agent AI. So basically creating workflows where you create these AI agents that do a very specific task. And then you have kind of I'll call it almost like a supervisor agent where it basically orchestrates all these different AI agents. So, if you had to do a full task, you can have each agent do a small piece of that task and then provide that information so that other AI agents can use it. And so you're seeing a lot more of that type of AI tool or AI tool being built. And so I think that's a trend that you're going to see more and more of that I think can be extremely helpful for startups and small businesses alike.
Definitely. So where do you see the future of AI agents? Like how much of people's work will be automated?
I always feel bad about this because I feel like I'm such a naysayer, right? I tell people all the time that AI is such a disruptive technology and it's unlike anything else that we've seen, right? I know the internet just was disruptive, but we've never seen a technology where the whole point of the technology is to learn and get better. And the issue is it's getting better at a faster pace and it's accelerating, right? And it's also the first time where you see it being able to do, it used to be automation and technology disruption used to disrupt the lower skilled, the entry level type jobs. What you're seeing with AI is it's disrupting the higher level jobs, the
Mhm.
doctors, the lawyers, like the jobs that you thought used to be untouchable, right? But now you're seeing AI being able to read medical records with less mistakes than a human. And the reality is, I don't necessarily see a limit. And I think the other piece of it is once you add Tesla is putting out these robots, a couple of Boston, I think there's a Boston side, there's another company that's doing a lot in the robotic space. Once
Mhm.
you now add AI right now, the biggest gap is it doesn't have a physical connection to the world, right?
Yeah.
If you add the robotics piece where it now has a physical connection to the world, you don't really see a limitation to it, if I'm being honest. And I hate to be that person, but I go on these podcasts and sometimes the hosts are like, oh, and I don't know when it's going to be, but at some point you see it being able to disrupt just about any type of role. And I think some people will say, oh, we need the human element. I think people, I'm not going to assume anyone's age, people in my generation probably do need the human element. But you've got a whole generation of kids right now that grew up on iPads, grew up on sitting next to each other, texting each other. And so I think they're going to be comfortable without that human element, whether that's good
Mm,
or bad. We can have a whole nother conversation on that. But I think at some point that mindset's going to shift where that human element isn't going to be as valued as it is now. I hate to be that negative voice, but logically, I don't see a limit to it, unfortunately.
that's true what you said about the generational thing, because I think for me right now, I would be a bit creeped out if it was like a salesperson who is a robot and they're trying
Mhm.
to sell me something and they just walk up and then knock on my door. I would be freaked out.
Yeah.
But I think the next generation, they'll be like, oh, okay. Oh, that's my friend.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're seeing it already where kids are communicating with AIs and they're going to get lost in that. And again, I mean, we can debate the ethics of this. That's a whole nother podcast episode, but I think they're going to get much more comfortable with that concept, which is, it is what it is. And I do think it's going to be an ethical humanitarian discussion that we do need to have to figure out because at some point it's going to be an issue. And I think if we don't have the discussion as a human race, I think we're going to get blindsided. And it's going to be, what is our purpose at some point?
Definitely. So, what are the first steps an entrepreneur should take when considering building a business using AI and no code tool?
So let me answer this question outside
Mhm.
of AI no code, right? I think I hear a lot of people say, oh, I want to start a business. I want to do X, Y, Z. And in my mind, I feel like that's the wrong approach, right? I always feel like your mindset should be, what's the problem that I want to solve? Try and tell people, have that mindset, look around you. What are some problems that you're experiencing? Nine times out of 10, you're going to be the expert on that problem. And so I think the mindset should be, what problem should I solve? And then no code and AI are the tools to solve that problem. Once you know what
Mm,
the problem is, then it's really a function of, okay, how can I leverage AI and no code to solve that problem? And a lot of times the answer kind of solves itself. Yeah, that makes sense. So I think you don't want to take the approach of what can I do with AI and no code? I think it's really a function of, okay, what problems can I solve? And then AI and no code are really powerful tools to solve that problem, but they're tools rather than the solution, if that makes sense.
definitely. So, it's not like you're building demand, but it's a demand that you have as the first user of your product who
Correct.
has a problem.
Correct. Yeah. And I think a lot of, and I've run into this as well. They get so hung up on creating a product and they create a product that no one uses. And versus if you start with the problem with, with enough demand, then that's mission number one, is making sure you're solving a problem painful enough that people will pay for it. That's what I tell people all the time.